a small town in Kipling, Saskatchewan, looked forward to a little spooky fun on Halloween night in 1992. But Candace Fonagy had no idea that the horrors that night would go far beyond her wildest expectations. First of all, she recently discovered that her partner was unfaithful to her. Then, she was unable to locate her friend when she went to see her at a nearby hospital. Candace was starting to feel nervous. Candace allowed Dr. John, the only physician in the community, to give her an injection as she sought solace from him. However, she soon sensed that she was being stripped and assaulted. She called the police and reported everyone's favorite doctor, Dr. John. No one, not even the police, took her allegations seriously because he denied doing anything of that kind. For years afterward, the entire community was plagued by suspicion about who was telling the truth, Candace or Dr. John. Then, after a grueling 5 years, a fresh perspective emerged, completely altering the narrative. Kipling, Saskatchewan, a charming town in rural Canada, is steeped in history. Its name honors the renowned writer Rudyard Kipling. Kipling grew from a tiny settlement in the early 1900s to a quaint town with about 1,000 residents. The town's architecture features wide streets and low-rise buildings, with a school and library at its center. There are a few restaurants, a co-op, a small cafe, farming supply stores, and more. Kipling is proud to be the center of the community's medical and educational resources. Kipling's close-knit community is comparable to a large family. The town comes alive with celebrations during the holidays. On Halloween, children dress up and roam the streets in search of candy. The chilly air is filled with a charming and celebratory atmosphere. However, for 23-year-old Candace Fonagy, a Kipling resident, Halloween 1992 changed her entire life. Candace Fonagy was working at a gas station on October 31, 1992, just like any other day. However, this particular day proved to be unique. When Danny, her boyfriend, showed up, they got into a heated fight because Danny had done something that had truly irritated Candace. Candace had had enough of his lies and was shocked to learn that he had asked another girl out to dinner. Out of rage, she punched Danny's truck, causing a dent. Candace was left furious as Danny walked off. She was so upset that she left work and went to see a friend at the Kipling Memorial Union Hospital to unwind, but things did not go as planned. Candace arrived at the Kipling Memorial Union Hospital, hoping to find her friend, but she was not present. Candace was still upset and struggling to calm down. Candace accepted the nurse's suggestion to speak with a doctor after realizing she needed assistance to calm her emotions. That evening, Dr. John Schneeberger was in charge. John Schneeberger was born in Zambia on January 1, 1961, into a family that valued education. He was a student at the prestigious Kearsney College in South Africa, where he was a standout student and made lots of friends. It came as no surprise when he enrolled in medical school, following in his brother's footsteps. He left Kearsney behind to pursue his studies at the University of Stellenbosch, which is located close to Cape Town. He demonstrated his excellence as a student, particularly in anesthesiology, by graduating in December of 1984. John Schneeberger relocated to Kipling, which is south of Saskatchewan, in the year 1987. He officially joined the medical staff at Kipling Medical Center in December 1988, having completed the requirements to become a physician in Canada. Before long, the talk of the town was all about the handsome new doctor with the distinctive accent. In the entire region, he was one of only 2 physicians. He quickly gained the reputation of Dr. John. His initials served as his emblem. He became very popular with the locals, who saw him as a compassionate physician in this small, close-knit community. He was popular with everyone, especially the women, thanks to his polished and easygoing demeanor. He revealed that his female patients were sometimes so enamored with him that they would pretend to be ill in order to see him. He was attractive, tall, and endearing. He was the most eligible bachelor in the town. He met Lisa Dillman, a single mother of 2 children, at his doctor's office. They tied the knot in 1991. He treated Lisa's kids as if they were his own, encouraging them to participate in sports. The couple was again blessed with 2 daughters, born barely a year apart. Not only was Dr. John skilled in general medicine, but he also recognized that the town needed more specialized care. As a full-time physician and father of four, he continued his education until 1992, when he became an expert in obstetrics and gynecology at the age of 38. In addition to all of this, he was spearheading an effort to raise funds for a new pool that the town would be able to use. At the high school, he also taught a special class on relationships and related topics. For Dr. John, everything was going well, but soon things would change. Dr. John was well known to Candace because, just 9 months prior, he had assisted her in giving birth. She confided in him about her altercation with Danny and her concerns regarding her outburst. Dr. John had witnessed an argument between Candace and Danny during a fundraiser for the neighborhood swimming pool. He was aware of Candace's fiery side, and this time she was unable to control her emotions. Dr. John briefly left the room and came back with a small syringe in his hand. Candace was a little taken aback because she had assumed she would be given medication, but the doctor clarified that a shot would be more appropriate, given her circumstances. Candace offered her right arm for the shot because she trusted him. Her body felt heavy as if she were asleep as soon as the medication was injected, and she was barely able to move. She moved from the chair to the exam bed with Dr. John's assistance, lying on her left side with her back to the wall. For Candace, it was an odd sensation. Versed, a type of sedative, is the medication that Dr. John used. It is typically utilized when patients must endure uncomfortable procedures like a colonoscopy. Normally, it puts patients to sleep and causes them to forget what happened during the procedure. But as you can see, every person is unique, and Candace was only immobilized, not unconscious or asleep. She could not react when she felt someone tuck her jeans down and move her underwear to the side while she was dazed. Then the dependable physician did the unimaginable to her. Candace wanted to scream, but all she managed to produce was a weak, raspy noise. She did not see anyone's face during this terrible moment, but Dr. John was the only person in the room with her. When it was all over, the doctor adjusted her pants and underwear. He went out of the room, zipping up his own pants. Because of the powerful medication, Candace was completely disoriented and unable to act. When a nurse checked on Candace, she was too exhausted and lightheaded to drive home, so the nurse recommended that Candace stay the night. Keeping the incident from the nurse, Candace went to bed feeling very disoriented. Because of the medication, Dr. John probably thought she would not remember anything, but that was not the case. Candace's head felt foggy the next morning, and for a brief while, she was not quite sure what had happened. How could Dr. John, who was usually so kind, do something so horrible? Her doubt, however, was short-lived as she immediately recalled every detail of what had transpired. Before she could leave the hospital, she had to wait for the doctor to finish his morning rounds. Upon seeing him at last, she inquired about the medication he had administered to her. He asked her why she wanted to know and if it had given her crazy dreams while remaining composed at the time. Although she was traumatized and still experiencing the side effects of the powerful medication, Candace was able to maintain focus even though she knew he would never admit to what he had done to her. If she ever wanted to prove the doctor's guilt, what she did next was vital. When she removed her panties, she noticed a stain. She hurriedly placed her panties in a plastic bag and closed it, realizing that this might be her only piece of evidence. Candace realized she had to get the word out to someone as soon as possible about what had occurred. However, she did not feel comfortable reporting it in Kipling, where she was raised, because she knew the doctor had connections to the local police department. Rather, she made the decision to travel 2 hours by car to Regina. She visited a clinic there so that the appropriate tests could be performed. The material on Candace's underwear was unquestionably bodily fluid, as the test revealed. Additionally, some was discovered in swabs taken from her private area and on her jeans. The Regina police were alerted by the hospital right away, and Candace informed them of the incident. She clarified that the bodily fluid they discovered could only have come from the attacker, Dr. John Schneeberger, because she had not engaged in any sexual activity in the weeks prior to the incident. DNA was a novel concept in science back in the early 1990s. 3 years before Candace's ordeal, in 1989, evidence was used for the first time in Canada to apprehend a criminal. She was very wise to go to the clinic straight away and get the test. done, since they could use the bodily fluid's DNA to see if it matched the doctor's. After learning about the situation, the Kipling police visited the hospital to conduct their own investigation. They started attempting to determine when the attack might have occurred. They discovered that there was a 20-minute window during which Dr. John could have carried out the attack. There was only one other man in the hospital that night, and he never left his wife alone while she was giving birth. After that, the police went to Dr. John's residence to question him regarding the incident. He was furious and claimed that on Halloween night, Candace was acting strangely when she arrived at the hospital. He claimed to have given her medication to help her relax. According to him, Candace may have confused things or possibly dreamed about the assault while under the influence of the medication. He hinted that she might have made these accusations to coerce him, but he provided a sample of his blood for DNA testing to demonstrate his innocence. For Candace, the lengthy DNA testing process seemed to go on forever. Around this period, rumors concerning Candace's assertions had begun to circulate in Kipling, a tiny town. She was not well believed by many. Some began to wonder if the assault actually occurred because Candace chose not to speak with the nurses who were on duty the night of the attack. There was a theory that Candace may have kept the evidence to force the doctor to pay her to drop the charges, even though Candace and the doctor may have had consensual sexual relations. She was held accountable for the events by some individuals. At this time, Candace felt incredibly isolated. Dr. John, on the other hand, was well received. He was well liked by the general public and had never been involved in any scandals. When he revealed what Candace had said to his wife, Lisa, she was convinced of his innocence. Lisa found it hard to accept that the father of her children and her devoted spouse could be cruel to anyone. She thought that Candace might have been having feelings for her husband and was hurting him by expressing these thoughts because he was not feeling the same way about her. She disliked Candace and was enraged that she was attempting to harm the family name and the reputation of her husband. By this point, Candace had received the results of the DNA test, and to her dismay, neither the DNA nor the bodily fluid discovered on her underwear matched the blood sample from Dr. John Schneeberger. It was decided that he was innocent. He was happy to move on and freely expressed his relief to his friends and co-workers. So, was it really a dream? And even if it was, how would one account for the stains on her panties? Still, the town did not need an explanation. Many believed that Candace had falsely accused the reputable physician, and as a result, she lost a number of friends. Even though they struggled, Candace's parents never wavered in their belief in her. Regardless of the DNA result, Candace was adamant that Dr. John had attacked her on Halloween and was not willing to back down. She insisted on a second test because she was positive that Dr. John, a specialist in medicine, had altered his blood sample in some way to produce different results. Police had to admit that they did not witness the initial blood test, which was required by law. Acknowledging Candace's tenacity, they went up to Dr. John to request another blood sample. Despite being incensed and insulted by the request, he reluctantly complied. He was aware that his reputation and career could be damaged by these charges. His wife, Lisa, was by his side the entire time, giving him unwavering support. Dr. John visited a lab in August 1993 to give another blood sample. 2 law enforcement officials were there to supervise the procedure this time. After the doctor rolled up his left sleeve, the lab technician started using a needle to take blood. But Dr. John stepped in, grabbed the technician's needle, and completed the task himself. An RCMP officer was standing close by, watching intently. To be extra thorough, Dr. John filled a second vial of blood after filling the first one. In response to the officer's questioning, Dr. John said that the prior blood draw had damaged a tendon, which was the reason for the bruises on his upper arm. The officer was satisfied because the explanations made sense. The blood files were then taken by the officers for analysis. Candace continued to endure the resentful glances from Kipling residents for 6 more months. She persisted in believing that she was correct and that the test results would eventually support her belief despite the obstacles. Nevertheless, her expectations were not met by reality. The results of the second test showed that, once more, the DNA profile of the fluid found in Candace's underwear did not match the blood sample from Dr. John. In 1994, the case against Dr. John Schneeberger was concluded. The DNA evidence appeared to confirm the opposite of what Candace instinctively felt to be true once more. Lisa Schneeberger was particularly vocal, implying that Candace was looking for financial gain from the situation. It turned into a case of a young mother on her own against a highly respected physician who was also a father of four and well-liked in the community. In Kipling, the criticism directed at Candace was tremendous. She knew it was time to go because she felt alienated in her hometown. She moved to Regina with her daughter, saying goodbye to the town. Life carried on in Kipling's usual manner. The Schneeberger family continued their journey, putting the past behind them. In a week following the release of the results of the second DNA test, Dr. John Schneeberger, who retained his South African residency rights, became a citizen of Canada. But the idea that Dr. John had gotten away with it haunted Candace, and she refused to let go. And Candace was afraid he would hurt someone else. She decided to take matters into her own hands because she was determined to find out. She hired a private investigator with the support of her attorney. After retiring from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Larry O'Brien, who had 25 years of experience, began his career as a private investigator. His impression of Candace's honesty was cemented after their first conversation. He agreed with her suspicion that Dr. John's DNA tests were not quite right. They had to come up with another method of proving his guilt, another way to get his DNA. O'Brien made a pretty smart first attempt. He sent an assistant to visit Dr. John Schneeberger's residence while posing as a representative of a nearby radio station. The doctor was tricked by the assistant into entering a fictitious contest and placing his entry in an envelope. John handed the envelope back after sealing it. Though this plan failed, it might have yielded the DNA that would validate Candace's story. Later on, O'Brien clarified that there was a problem with the envelope. Despite being chosen at random from a fresh box, it became contaminated in some way, which was not supposed to happen. It was uncommon to have secrets in a small town like Kipling. They were aware of one another's business. The cleaning lady from Schneeberger's knew the Fonagies, and she told Lisa that the Fonagies had a private investigator. Lisa was enraged to find that Candace had not given up because she thought the unpleasant situation was over. The Kipling Medical Center sent a letter to Candace's family within a week, telling them they were no longer welcome. In a town with just 2 doctors, this was a serious problem. They would have to get medical attention outside of Kipling if they got sick. Larry O'Brien followed Dr. John in his car on Saturday, March 23, 1996, while he waited for him to park. The first initial of the doctor's last name, Schnee, was personalized on the license plate of his car. This was without a doubt the vehicle belonging to the man Candace thought had abused her. As soon as Dr. John was out of sight, the private investigator attempted to open the driver's door, which, like most cars in Kipling, was unlocked. He knew precisely what he was looking for. He looked in the ashtray and found a used chapstick. He also found hair strands on the headrest of the driver's seat. Although it appeared brand new, he discovered the edge was worn when he opened it. It had already been put to use. He sealed it in a forensic bag after rubbing it on the envelope's window section. Candace paid for DNA testing at a separate lab by using a loan from her parents. The hair samples could not be tested because they lacked roots. On the chapstick, though, was some residual saliva. When the results were received after 2 weeks, they did not match the blood sample that Dr. John had provided. But the tale had one more twist. The stain discovered in Candace's assault kit and the DNA on Dr. John's chapstick matched. It was finally verified that Dr. John Schneeberger was, in fact, the person who had attacked Candace, as she had always believed. Although it took her 4 years to prove this, the war was far from over. A significant obstacle stood in their way, notwithstanding the chapstick's evidence. They could not demonstrate that John was the only chapstick user, and the fact that the private investigator had obtained evidence by breaking into this car without authorization meant that it would not be accepted in court. They gave the police access to the evidence, but they were limited in what they could do. Nevertheless, the cops were persuaded by the evidence that Candace was telling the truth. They only needed to find a different way to prove Dr. John's guilt, because they were positive he was guilty. With the evidence that Candace's private investigator had uncovered, the officers came up to John and requested a third blood sample. In November of 1996, Dr. John had additional blood drawn. This time, the entire procedure was recorded by the police. The doctor refused to allow the nurse to prick his finger, stating that he had a medical condition that would cause severe bruises if blood were extracted from his hands. He held out his arm and complied. They could not make him do anything against his will without a court order. The nurse's expression of surprise can be heard during the testing procedure in the video recording. Nothing looked particularly fresh about the blood she had just taken from the doctor's left arm. It appeared to be ancient due to its dark brown color. After examining the sample, the technicians determined that it was of inadequate quality, which precluded carrying out appropriate testing. Candace was incensed. If the blood seemed strange, why had they accepted it? When the doctor was still at the lab, why did not they insist on another sample? She had gone a long way in demonstrating that Dr. John was not who he claimed to be, and she had no intention of giving up just yet. In a desperate attempt, Candace bravely decided to sue the doctor in civil court. She also informed the nearby medical society about his behavior. It was evident throughout the court proceedings that the majority of people supported Dr. John. Lisa, his wife, was incensed that Candace had implicated her husband in such a heinous act and was not inclined to accept the possibility that it was true. She even used derogatory language to characterize Candace during a local TV station interview. Sadly, the civil lawsuit never proceeded, and Candace was forced to accept the possibility that Dr. John might get away with his misdeeds. But things were about to turn around. Lisa Schneeberger learned of something going on within her own family's home on April 25, 1997. Her 15-year-old daughter from her first marriage informed her that something strange had been going on. During the night, her stepfather came to her room and gave her an injection. When she awoke, she found a condom wrapper in her bed. She showed her mother by bringing her to her bedroom. When Lisa asked her daughter if it had happened before, she replied that it was not the first time. Lisa recalled inquiring once about giving her daughter an injection, to which her husband acknowledged having done so and explained that the girl had been coughing and he was just trying to help her. Lisa had never heard any coughing, but she did not think twice about it because he was the doctor. Lisa discovered that when her daughter was just 13 years old, 2 years prior, John had begun abusing her. Lisa questioned her daughter about why she had not spoken up earlier, and she gave an explanation of her reasoning. If her mother did not believe Candace, why would she believe her? She could never have imagined, even in her most romantic fantasies, that the devoted father and stepfather she loved so much was actually a predator. Lisa discovered sedatives, including Versed, condoms, and syringes concealed on a high shelf in her husband's home office. It was a major step when Lisa asked John to leave their house and told the police everything. When Candace learned the news, she was shocked. After spending years battling for justice and fearing that John might harm someone else, learning that he had preyed on his own stepdaughter was undoubtedly bad news. Candace said that day she found out would always be in her memory. John was again sampled by the police. This time, it is hair, saliva, and blood. They collected the blood from his finger. Upon receiving the test results, it was verified that Dr. John's DNA corresponded with both the DNA discovered in Candace's underwear and the DNA from the chapstick that was discovered in his vehicle. Following his arrest, John was charged with assaulting both his stepdaughter and Candace Fonagy. Despite Dr. John's best efforts to persuade Lisa of his innocence and his desire for her support, Lisa happily decided to believe her daughter and rejected his attempts to change her mind. Lisa was left alone to raise her 4 children, the youngest of whom was only 13 months old. To pay off the mortgage, she had to sell the family vehicle. In Red Deer, Alberta, she was able to secure employment at the Diabetes Association. This gave her the opportunity to start over in a new location and provide for her family. The trial of Dr. John Schneeberger started in 1999. He continued to refute the accusations during the trial. He was under the impression that Candace had broken into his home, removed the used condom from the basement trash, and used the bodily fluid to fabricate accusations. He asserted that she intended to set him up for financial gain and blackmail. As soon as he realized what was going on, he acted decisively to defend his family, his reputation in the community, and himself. He meant manipulation of evidence when he mentioned strong actions. Even after he confessed, no one knew how he did it. The eagerly anticipated moment soon arrived. It was demanded of Dr. John an explanation of how he altered the DNA evidence. The public was profoundly affected by the genuinely shocking events that transpired during this crime. But when his desperate plan was eventually revealed, the real surprise was still to come. Dr. John had surgically placed a tube, a 15 centimeters Penrose drain filled with the blood of another man, into his arm next to his actual vein, following the initial request for a blood sample in 1992. Also, he had added anticoagulants to maintain the blood's fluidity. He set things up so that the technician drew blood from the tube rather than his real vein when he was brought to the police lab for testing. He took out the tube following the test. He went through this again for the second test 9 months later. He put the tube back in April 1996 after finding out that Candace had hired an investigator. This could clarify why the nurse believed the blood to be aged. It belonged to Danny Sabo, one of his male patients, and it was, in fact, as old as 7 months. After watching the video, investigators saw how Dr. John had manipulated the situation. He consistently extended his left arm and rolled up his sleeve just above the elbow, concealing the scar from where he had cut himself to insert the tube. There is a brief moment in the video where you can see the elevated skin in the shape of a tube. In the spotlight, as the main witness was Candace. Her voice was finally acknowledged and heard after all these years. The defense tried to portray her as a money lover and a deceiver, but she refused to accept that. As resolute as ever, she stressed that she had no hidden agenda for searching for the doctor's truth all those years. The defense argued that the sedative Candace had taken had clouded her memory of the crime. "We will drug you on Versed and you can explain to us how it feels," Candace said to John's attorney. Took 7 years before Dr. John Schneeberger was found guilty of assault, administering a noxious substance, and obstructing justice. For these offenses, he received a 6-year prison sentence. He was very fortunate to have escaped the usual life sentence that was the maximum punishment for these offenses. Furthermore, there was not enough proof to convict him of assaulting a stepdaughter, so the case was dismissed. Candace Fonagy felt vindicated, nevertheless. "This is a glorious day that I have waited for 7 years," the woman remarked following the trial. "I hope he rots because that is exactly what he deserves for all the hurt he caused." The College of Physicians and Surgeons of Saskatchewan revoked his medical license because of his misuse of a position of trust. Lisa Schneeberger submitted a divorce petition. Dr. John insisted on keeping his parental rights even after receiving his sentence, and Lisa was compelled to take their daughters to see him in jail on the last Sunday of each month. They were also required to call them on Mondays for an hour-long talk. The girls would frequently hide behind their mother in tears when they visited him in prison. They avoided being close to or conversing with their father out of fear. He had broken their family and hurt their sister. Because the meeting was too upsetting for the young girls, who were 5 and 6 years old, the social worker stepped in and ended it. Even John acknowledged that this was an inappropriate method for his daughters to meet with him, and that Lisa did not need to bring them back. Lisa told immigration authorities that he had lied on his citizenship application and that there was no investigation against him because she was worried he would be released from prison in 6 years and inflict more harm on the family. After that, he was deported to South Africa, where he was granted permanent residency. He moved to live with his mother in Durban after running out of options. He worked as a caterer for a while before turning to religion after being denied his medical license. In recent years, John joined the Durban Wine Academy, which is affiliated with the Cape Wine Academy, and received approval to lead wine tasting courses and provide sommelier training. In addition to working as a care assistant in a Saskatchewan addiction services facility, Candace Fonagy found happiness in marriage. Regarding Lisa Dillman, she is still of the opinion that her ex-husband has no regrets. Despite the complete upheaval in her life, she concentrated on raising her daughters. "At least I can tell my girls when they are older I tried," she remarked. "They will be aware that their mother made an effort to keep them away from him."
In 2002, 23-year-old Cheryl Taylor lived in Weldon, North Carolina. She was married to John Osby, her high school sweetheart. They had a 7-year-old daughter named Justice. On the morning of August 16, 2002, Justice woke up and realized that Cheryl had not woken her up in time for the school bus, and she missed it. She went to her mom's bedroom, and it was there that she discovered that someone had taken Cheryl's life. An autopsy showed that she had been strangled and presumably assaulted. It was not made public if there were signs of forced entry or if investigators were able to collect forensic evidence from the crime scene that belonged to the perpetrator. Despite an extensive investigation by authorities, no arrests were made and the case went cold. Justice and John grieved together for 17 more years. Tragically again, by December 2019, after going missing, John Osby was found fatally shot and rolled up in a blanket near Sycamore Street in Weldon. Investigators were unable to track down the person that shot him, and for years the family was left wondering if they would ever get answers to what happened to John and Cheryl Taylor. That changed when Sheriff Tyree Davis hired Detective Sergeant Rich Summerjai as Halifax County's dedicated cold case investigator in January 2023. His job was to pore over the office's unsolved cold cases, looking for anything that investigators may have missed in the past, and using new technology to find clues that were out of reach before. Detective Rich Summerjai first looked into John Osby's case before realizing Cheryl's life had been taken by someone years earlier. He identified the person responsible for what happened to Cheryl. Finally, on July 21, 2023, 46-year-old Lewis Turner Jr. was arrested and charged with taking Cheryl Taylor's life. He was living in Northampton County, North Carolina. It is not known yet if he is responsible for shooting John Osby. It was revealed that Turner was a friend of Cheryl and her family back in 2002 when he took her life. Turner was 25 years old when the crime took place. He has 2 other criminal charges on his record: assaults from when he was a teen. In both of those cases, he got probation. After being arrested and charged with voluntary manslaughter, Turner was held at the Halifax County Jail under $250,000 bond. Scott Hall, patrol captain of the Halifax County Sheriff's Office, outlined the reasoning behind the voluntary manslaughter charge. This was not a premeditated crime with malice. Based on the facts of the case and elements of the crime, we charged accordingly. Sheriff Tyree Davis remarked how he cried tears of joy at being able to arrest a suspect in connection with Cheryl's case. I received the call that we were able to solve one of our cold cases. A cold case from over 20 years ago. No one knew about this information, and we could not say anything until we notified the family first. However, I was instantly overcome with emotion and tears started to flow. As a member of the State Commission, I was sitting up front with the other board members, and I tried to hold things together. I did so just by wiping the tears away, but once I started sniffling, I knew I needed to leave the room. Folks, I can tell you that these tears were tears of joy. These were tears of excitement. Excitement not only for Taylor's family, but also excitement for her friends, co-workers, schoolmates, and anyone that she had ever crossed paths with. I was excited for the community because this is a beacon of hope for all those families that need closure too. Cheryl's daughter, Justice Osby, had this to say after the arrest. Unbelievable. We never knew this day was coming. Justice said she is grateful to everyone who helped bring Turner to justice, and she is glad that she can finally have some closure. She said, "I am just so thankful for everyone that participated and helped me get closure for my family, because today is a good day."